My mother told me to figure it out while I was lying in a hospital bed with a fractured femur, a dislocated shoulder, and a 7-week-old baby at home who needed me. Those were her exact words. Figure it out. She said them while standing in a boarding line for a 12-day spa cruise to the Bahamas. I could hear the ship's horn in the background. I could hear champagne glasses clinking, and I could hear my mother choosing a vacation over her daughter and her grandchild, without even a moment of hesitation. My name is Mariana Jenkins. I'm 31 years old, and until October 3rd of last year, I believed that family meant something. That blood was thicker than water, that when you really truly needed your mother, she would show up. I was wrong about all of it. Let me take you back to that Tuesday afternoon, October 3rd, 2:47 p.m. I was driving home from the veterinary clinic where I work as a billing specialist in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I'd left a little early because my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was watching Nora, my 7-week-old daughter, and she had a dentist appointment at 5. My husband, Theo, was 47 minutes away in Elizabethtown installing a new AC unit for some commercial building. The plan was simple: pick up Nora, start dinner, wait for Theo to get home. The plan lasted until I reached the intersection of Scottsville Road and Campbell Lane. I never saw the FedEx truck. I heard it. This massive roar of an engine that shouldn't have been there because my light was green. I know my light was green. And then the world became glass and metal and spinning. The truck hit my driver's side door doing at least 40 miles an hour. My little 2014 Ford Focus with the 127,000 miles didn't stand a chance. Neither did I. I woke up in an ambulance. The pain was like nothing I'd ever experienced. This white-hot fire running from my hip down to my knee. My shoulder felt wrong, twisted somehow. Every breath was a knife between my ribs. The paramedic kept telling me to stay calm, stay still. Help was coming. All I could think about was Nora, my baby, who was watching my baby. They took me to the medical center at Bowling Green, room 412. I'll never forget that number. Fractured right femur that would need surgical repair, dislocated left shoulder, 3 cracked ribs. The doctor explained everything very carefully, very professionally, and all I heard was 6 to 8 weeks of recovery, possibly longer. You won't be able to care for an infant alone. I called Theo first. He answered on the second ring. And when I told him what happened, I heard his voice crack in a way I'd never heard before. He said he was coming. He'd figure out work. Just hold on. He made it to the hospital by 5:15, which meant he'd driven that 47 minutes in probably 35. He'd already picked up Nora from Mrs. Patterson. He was holding our daughter in one arm and my hand with the other, and he looked like he hadn't breathed since my call. Theo could take 5 days off. That was the maximum. Unpaid because HVAC technicians don't get generous leave policies. And if he missed more than a week, they'd give his jobs to someone else. Our mortgage payment was due on the 15th. $1,340 that we couldn't miss without serious consequences. We had maybe $4,000 in savings. The math was already impossible. And I hadn't even had surgery yet. That's when I called my mother, Darlene Pritchard, 59 years old, remarried to a man named Hank, who treated her like a queen, living in a beautiful 4-bedroom house in Louisville that she constantly photographed for Facebook. My mother, who I'd sent $400 to every single month for the past 3 years to help with property taxes. My mother, who I'd given $2,800 to just 3 months earlier for an emergency roof repair she swore she'd pay back by September. She answered on the 5th ring. I could tell immediately she was somewhere busy, somewhere loud. There was music, there was chatter, there was the unmistakable sound of vacation. I explained everything. The accident, the injuries, the surgery I needed, the baby I couldn't care for, the husband who could only take 5 days off. I begged her really to come to Bowling Green for a week or two, just until I could walk again, just until I could hold my own daughter without help. Her response was a sigh, an actual audible, irritated sigh. She told me she was in Miami. She was about to board the Serenity of the Seas for a cruise she'd booked 8 months ago, a spa cruise, 12 days in the Bahamas with Hank. She couldn't possibly cancel now. Did I know how much those tickets cost? Did I know how long she'd been looking forward to this? I said, Mom, I can't walk. I have a newborn, I need help. And she said the words that ended whatever was left of our relationship. Mariana, your sister Sloane never puts me in these situations. Figure it out. I've had this cruise booked for 8 months. Then she said she had to go. They were calling her boarding group and she hung up. I lay there in that hospital bed. Morphine drip attached to my arm, leg and Cheon. Staring at the ceiling. There was a water stain on the tile directly above me. I spent 4 hours looking at it before surgery. It was shaped exactly like my mother's face. Disappointed, dismissive, looking down at me. I'm not saying it was a sign, but I'm not saying it wasn't either. While I was in surgery, getting a metal rod put in my femur, my mother was sipping champagne on a deck chair. While I was learning to use a bedpan because I couldn't walk to the bathroom, my mother was getting a seaweed wrap at the onboard spa, while my husband was trying to be a new father and a full-time employee and a caretaker for his wife all at once, sleeping maybe 3 hours a night. My mother was posting photos on Facebook with captions like, "Self-care isn't selfish," and treating myself because I deserve it. I watched those posts from my hospital bed. Each one was a tiny knife. But here's the thing. They also clarified something I'd been refusing to see for years. I thought about the $400 a month I'd been sending her. 3 years. That's $14,400. I thought about the $2,800 for the roof that she never paid back. I thought about last Christmas when I bought her a cashmere sweater and she got me a candle from Home Goods with a clearance sticker still on the bottom. I thought about my wedding, which she complained was too far to drive to even though it was 2 hours away. I thought about my sister Sloane, who got a brand new Kia Sportage last year as a gift from Mom while I'm still driving a car with 127,000 miles that just got totaled by a delivery truck. Your sister Sloane never puts me in these situations. Sloane, who hasn't held a job longer than 6 months in her entire 28 years of life. Sloane, who borrowed $15,000 from our mother and never paid back a cent. Sloane, who didn't come to my wedding because she had a migraine. That's Sloane. That's the standard of good behavior. That's what I'm supposed to live up to. Something shifted in me that night. Not broke, shifted, like a bone setting into a new position. Different, permanent. I didn't know yet what I was going to do about it, but I knew lying in that hospital bed that I was done being the daughter who figured it out. I was done figuring it out for people who couldn't even be bothered to show up. Before we continue, please hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Thank you so much for being here. Now, where was I? Right, lying in a hospital bed doing math that didn't add up and trying to figure out how to care for a 7-week-old baby when I couldn't even stand up to use the bathroom. Theo took his 5 days of unpaid leave. 5 days, that's what we had before reality came crashing back. Our savings account had $4,200 in it. The mortgage was $1,340. That left us $2,860 to survive on until I could work again, which the doctor said would be 6 to 8 weeks minimum. Here's some more math that kept me up at night. A night nurse costs money. Specifically in Bowling Green, Kentucky in October of last year, a qualified night nurse cost $28 an hour. If I needed someone from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., 10 hours, that's $280 a night, nearly $2,000 a week, for one person to help me not drop my baby because I couldn't lift her with a dislocated shoulder and couldn't stand because of a fractured femur. I found Gladys Horton on care.com at 2 a.m. scrolling through my phone. With my one good arm while pain medication made the screen swim. Gladys was 67 years old, a retired NICU nurse from Elizabethtown, and her profile said she specialized in emergency situations and difficult families. I didn't know yet how perfect that description was. She started the next night, $280 gone. I canceled our anniversary dinner reservation. Theo's birthday was coming up in November, and I'd already bought him a new drill set, the cordless kind he'd been wanting for a year. I returned it, got back $173. Then I did something that hurt more than my shoulder. I sold my grandmother's pearl earrings on Facebook Marketplace. Some woman in Nashville drove up to get them. Gave me $180 cash. Those earrings were the only thing I had from my grandmother who actually loved me, who actually showed up when I needed her, who died when I was 19. $180. That's what I was doing while my mother was at the captain's table dinner posting photos with the caption "Living my best life with my love," Hank smiling awkwardly in a blazer beside her. Day 4 in the hospital. I tried one more thing. I called my sister. Sloane answered like I'd interrupted something important. I could hear reality TV in the background. I explained the situation, shortened version. Just the essentials: car accident, broken leg, need help with the baby, mom's on a cruise. Sloane laughed. Actually laughed, this little snort of disbelief. Like I just told her the funniest joke. She said she wasn't really a baby person. I knew that about her. She said besides she was going through something right now and she really needed to focus on herself. Going through something. I asked what. Tyler broke up with her. Tyler, the 24-year-old who worked at a vape shop called Cloud 9. They'd been together for 2 months, maybe 3. Sloane described it like a death in the family. She said she couldn't possibly take care of an infant right now. Not with everything she was dealing with. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask her if she knew what I was dealing with. I wanted to remind her that I'd driven 3 hours to help her move apartments last year, even though I was 6 months pregnant and my back was killing me. I wanted to tell her that Tyler from the vape shop wasn't worth the mascara she was probably crying into her pillow over. I didn't say any of that. I just said okay and hung up. Sloane's relationship with Tyler lasted exactly 63 days. I know because she posted their anniversary on Instagram and then their breakup on the same account 2 months later. That's about as long as his employee discount lasted. I'm not saying my sister is shallow, but she cried harder when the discount ended than when he did. Day 6. Theo went back to work. He didn't want to, I could see it in his face. This torn apart looked like he was abandoning me. But we'd already done the math together, sitting in that hospital room with a calculator and a spreadsheet. And there was no version where he could stay home and we could keep the house. So he kissed me goodbye, kissed Nora goodbye, and drove to Elizabethtown to fix rich people's air conditioning, while I lay in bed watching our savings drain. Day 8. I got transferred to a rehabilitation facility, still in Bowling Green, just a different building with different ceiling tiles to stare at. The physical therapist was a cheerful guy named Derek who seemed personally offended by my broken femur. He kept saying things like, "We're going to get you walking again and you're stronger than you think." And honestly, his optimism was exhausting, but I appreciated it. That's when Hank called. Hank Bellwether, my mother's husband of 12 years, retired regional manager for a trucking company, now does consulting work from home. 62 years old, quiet, polite, the kind of man who holds doors open and says ma'am to waitresses. I'd always liked Hank, even though I barely knew him. He stayed out of family drama. He let my mother handle the daughters. The cruise had ended. They were back in Louisville, and Hank had seen something on Facebook, a post from my Aunt Colleen about the accident, asking people to pray for my recovery. He sounded confused. He sounded embarrassed. He said Darlene had told him I'd had a minor fender bender, a little whiplash, nothing serious. She said I was fine. He had no idea about the surgery, the fractured femur, the weeks of recovery. He offered to drive down that day, 2 hours. He'd be there by dinner. I said no, and I meant it. Not because I was proud, but because Hank wasn't the one who owed me anything. Hank didn't know the truth about his wife, and I wasn't going to make him clean up her mess. That wasn't fair to either of us. I had Gladys. I was managing. But I thanked him, and I meant that too. After I hung up, I thought about what he'd said. Darlene told him it was a minor fender bender. She didn't just refuse to help me. She actively lied to her husband so he wouldn't know she'd refused. She constructed a whole alternative reality where I was fine, where her choice to stay on the cruise was reasonable, where she wasn't the villain. That was new information. That changed things. Then came the family grapevine. Aunt Colleen, my mother's older sister, called to check on me. She's 63, widowed, lives in Lexington. She's always been the quiet one in the family, the peacekeeper, the one who smooths things over. But that day on the phone, her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. She told me what my mother had been saying to the extended family, that I exaggerated my injuries for attention, that I had a husband so she didn't know why I expected her to drop everything, that some people just love to play the victim. I listened. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. There was no point. My mother had already written the story, and she'd cast herself as the reasonable one, and me as the dramatic daughter causing problems. But something Aunt Colleen said stayed with me. She said she needed to talk to me in person. She said there were things I needed to know. She said she should have told me years ago and she was sorry she'd waited this long. 2 days later, she showed up at the rehab facility with a tuna casserole and a manila folder full of documents. And that's when everything I thought I knew about my family fell apart. Aunt Colleen sat in the plastic chair next to my bed and didn't touch the casserole she'd brought. She just looked at me with this expression I'd never seen on her before. Guilty, sad, and determined all at once. She started by apologizing. She said she should have told me this 3 years ago when it happened. She said she'd been a coward. She said my mother had threatened her, and she'd believed the threat, and she'd hated herself for it ever since. I didn't understand what she was talking about. Not yet. Colleen told me to think back to March 2021, my father's death. Raymond Pritchard, 61 years old, heart attack in his sleep, gone before anyone could say goodbye. I remembered it, of course. I remembered the funeral. I remembered my mother managing everything, the arrangements, the paperwork, the estate. I remembered being grateful that someone was handling it because I was too deep in grief to function. What I didn't remember was asking about money. I'd been too devastated to think about inheritance. But Colleen remembered. She remembered because she'd seen the life insurance policy years before. My father had shown it to her back when he and my mother were still married. He wanted Colleen to know just in case. Just in case Darlene tried something. That's what he said. Just in case Darlene tried something. The policy was worth $80,000 split equally between his 2 daughters. $40,000 to me, $40,000 to Sloane. Not to Darlene, to us, his children. That was his wish. Colleen watched me process this. She could see the math happening behind my eyes. I never received $40,000. I never received anything. When I'd ask my mother about it months after the funeral, carefully, gently, not wanting to seem greedy, she'd told me the funeral expenses had eaten through everything. There was nothing left. I believed her. Why wouldn't I believe my own mother? The funeral cost $8,500. I knew because I'd helped plan it. I'd been there when Darlene selected the casket, the flowers, the reception hall. I'd even contributed $2,000 of my own money toward the expenses because Darlene said she was overwhelmed and stressed. And couldn't I help? Couldn't I please help with something? $8,500. Not $40,000. Not even close. Colleen reached into the manila folder and pulled out the documents she'd been keeping for 3 years. The life insurance policy clear as day. Beneficiary 1, Mariana Jenkins, $40,000. Beneficiary 2, Sloane Pritchard, $40,000. Policy number, insurance company, payout terms, everything official, everything documented. My father gave these copies to Colleen the year before he died. He said he didn't trust Darlene with money. He said he wanted someone outside the situation to know the truth. He said if anything ever seemed wrong after he was gone, Colleen should tell his daughters. Colleen tried. 3 years ago, after the funeral, she asked Darlene about the insurance payout, just casually, just checking. Darlene's response wasn't casual at all. She pulled Colleen aside at a family barbecue and told her very clearly that if she kept asking questions, she wouldn't be welcome at family events anymore, ever. She would be cut off, erased, alone. For a 63-year-old widow whose entire social life revolved around family gatherings, that threat worked. Colleen shut up. She hated herself for it, but she shut up until now. Until she saw what happened with my accident. Until she realized that her silence had allowed Darlene to keep hurting me, keep taking from me, and she couldn't live with it anymore. I asked the obvious question. If Sloane and I were each supposed to get $40,000, and Sloane definitely got hers because Sloane bought a used car 6 months after Dad died and bragged about paying cash, then where was my $40,000? Colleen didn't know for certain, but she had a guess. And it involved something Darlene had said at Christmas too, years ago. Family party, Darlene's house, too much wine. Colleen was helping clean up the kitchen when Darlene got chatty in that loose, unguarded way drunk people sometimes do. She started talking about money, about security, about how every smart woman needs something her husband doesn't know about. She told Colleen she had a secret account, emergency fund, she called it, rainy day money. Hank handles everything else, she said, but this is mine. This is my safety net. At the time, Colleen thought it was just tipsy bragging, rich people nonsense. But now, sitting in my hospital room, the pieces fit together in an ugly way. My father's money, my inheritance, hidden in an account Darlene's own husband didn't know existed. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not surprise exactly. More like confirmation, like I'd always known something was wrong. And now I finally had proof. But Colleen wasn't done. She had one more piece of the puzzle. For years, Darlene had been complaining to her about Sloane's spending, the credit cards, the shopping, the debt that just kept growing. $23,000 across 4 cards. Last Colleen heard Sloane couldn't make the minimum payments. She didn't have the income, so someone else was making them for her. Darlene. Every month. $400 to $500 just to keep Sloane's credit from collapsing completely. 2 years ago, Darlene even asked Colleen for a loan, said it was to help Sloane with debt just temporarily, just until Sloane got back on her feet. Colleen refused. She didn't have that kind of money. And besides, she knew Sloane would never get back on her feet as long as someone kept catching her every time she fell. Shortly after Colleen refused that loan, I started sending my mother $400 a month for property taxes. The timing matched. The amounts matched. I wasn't helping my mother pay taxes on her house. I was paying my sister's credit card bills without knowing it. $14,400 over 3 years, plus the $2,800 for the fake roof repair, plus my stolen inheritance. $31,500 after funeral expenses, $48,700. That's what my mother had taken from me through lies, manipulation, and outright theft. Nearly $50,000, and I'd thanked her for the privilege of giving it. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but the tears wouldn't come. Maybe I was too tired, maybe I was too drugged, or maybe some part of me had always known. And the confirmation was almost a relief. At least now I wasn't crazy. At least now I knew I wasn't imagining the imbalance, the unfairness, the constant feeling that I was giving and getting nothing back. Colleen held my hand. She said she was sorry over and over. She said she should have told me sooner. She said our father would be so disappointed in Darlene and so proud of me for being nothing like her. I asked her to send me the insurance documents, official copies, certified mail. I gave her the address of the rehab facility. She said they'd arrive within the week. When she left, she hugged me carefully, avoiding my bad shoulder, and said something I'll never forget. Your grandmother always said Darlene peaked in high school, homecoming court, 1983. It's been 40 years of downhill skiing without the mountains. I laughed. It hurt my ribs, but I laughed anyway. Alone in that room, I stared at the ceiling. Different tiles, same feeling. And I thought about what I was going to do. My first instinct was confrontation. Blow it all up. Call my mother. Scream at her. Demand answers. Let the whole family know what she'd done. But that's what the old Mariana would have done. The Mariana who figured it out. Who kept the peace. Who let herself be used because fighting back seemed too hard. I wasn't that person anymore. The accident had broken something in me, yes, but it had also broken something loose, some barrier I'd built to protect myself from seeing the truth about my own family. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want drama. I just wanted what was mine, and I was going to get it. The documents arrived on October 24th, certified mail, just like Colleen promised. I held them in my hands. Proof of my father's wishes, proof of my mother's betrayal, and I started to plan. Not a scene, not a confrontation. Something quieter, something smarter. Something my mother wouldn't see coming until it was already too late. October 25th, 3 weeks and 1 day after the accident that changed everything. I came home. Not walking exactly, more like shuffling with a walker. My right leg still refusing to cooperate the way legs are supposed to. Theo had rearranged the living room so I could get from the couch to the bathroom without navigating around furniture. He'd set up a little station next to the sofa. Phone charger, water bottle, pain medication, baby monitor, laptop, everything I needed within arm's reach. Gladys transitioned from every night to as needed. We couldn't afford her anymore. Not really, but she insisted on checking in twice a week anyway. She said it was because she wanted to see Nora's progress, I think it was because she wanted to make sure I hadn't lost my mind. Fair concern, honestly. I was spending a lot of time staring at spreadsheets. The certified documents from Aunt Colleen sat in a folder on my coffee table. I'd read them probably 40 times by now. Policy number LI 7,834,521. State Farm Life Insurance issued to Raymond Pritchard. Beneficiaries: Mariana Jenkins, $40,000. Sloan Pritchard, $40,000. Clear as day, black and white, undeniable. I called State Farm on October 27th, gave them my father's information, the policy number, my own details as a listed beneficiary. The customer service representative was polite, professional, and confirmed everything Aunt Colleen had told me. Both checks were issued in April 2021. Both checks were cashed. The estate had been settled. As far as State Farm was concerned, everyone had received their money. Everyone except me. I started building my case. Not for court, I wasn't there yet, but for myself. I needed to see the full picture laid out in front of me. So, I created a spreadsheet because that's what billing specialists do when the world stops making sense. We make spreadsheets. Column A, what I gave. Column B, what I received. Column C, what was stolen. 3 years of bank statements showing the $400 monthly transfers to my mother's account. 48 payments. $14,400. I told myself it was for property taxes. I told myself I was helping my mother keep her home. The home she owned outright after marrying Hank. The home that didn't have property tax problems because Hank handled all the finances and would never let a bill go unpaid. I've been paying my sister's credit card minimums for 3 years without knowing it. Next line. July 2024. $2,800 emergency roof repair. The text messages were still on my phone. My mother swearing she'd pay me back by September, promising it was just temporary, thanking me for being such a good daughter. September came and went. No money, no mention of it. I didn't bring it up because I didn't want to seem petty. Petty. I thought asking for my own money back would be petty. Final line: inheritance. $40,000 minus $8,500 for funeral expenses. And I'd contributed $2,000 of that myself. So really, the math should be different, but I was trying to be fair. $31,500. Money my father specifically wanted me to have. Money that was supposed to help me build a life, buy a house, raise a family. Gone. Total $48,700. I looked at that number for a long time. Nearly $50,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was 4 years of daycare for Nora. That was a safety net, a cushion, a future. And my mother had taken it while smiling at me across Thanksgiving tables and accepting my birthday cards and telling me she loved me. But here's the thing. I didn't want to go to war over $48,000. I didn't want lawyers and courtrooms and family drama that would drag on for years. I didn't want to become the villain in my mother's story, the ungrateful daughter who sued her own family. I wanted one thing: the inheritance. $31,500. My father's money left to me, stolen by my mother. That was clean, that was documented, that was mine by every legal and moral standard that existed. The monthly payments, the roof repair, those were technically gifts. I'd given them willingly, even if I'd given them under false pretenses. A lawyer would tell me they'd be hard to recover. My mother would argue she'd needed the help, that I'd offered freely, that I couldn't take back a gift just because I was angry. Ow. But the inheritance was different. That was theft, that was fraud, that was provable. So, I made a decision. One number, one demand, no wiggle room. I could have thrown everything at her, the roof, the monthly payments, all of it. But I know my mother. Give her too many things to argue about and she'll argue forever. She'll muddy the waters until nobody remembers what they were fighting about in the first place. That's her specialty. That's how she survived this long. One number, $31,500. Now, I just needed the right moment. November 1st. For the first time in 3 years, I did not send my mother $400. I didn't announce it. I didn't explain. I just didn't do it. The automatic transfer I'd set up years ago, I canceled. It took about 30 seconds. 3 years of payments. Ended with a few taps on my phone. I figured it would take her a while to notice. My mother isn't the type to check her bank account daily. She'd assume it was a delay, a glitch, a holiday slowdown. She'd wait. Her pride wouldn't let her ask directly. Well, not at first. She'd convince herself there was a reasonable explanation that didn't involve her daughter finally wising up. November 8th, 5 weeks after the accident. I walked into my physical therapy appointment using a cane instead of a walker. Derek, my therapist, actually applauded. He said I was ahead of schedule, that most femur fractures don't progress this fast, and what was motivating me. I told him revenge is excellent cardio. He laughed. I wasn't joking. That same week, I went back to work part-time, 4 hours a day at the veterinary clinic, sitting at my desk, processing invoices and insurance claims. My coworkers had sent flowers while I was in the hospital, a beautiful arrangement with a card signed by everyone. They'd also covered my shifts without complaint and saved all my files exactly the way I'd left them. That's what normal people do when someone they care about gets hurt. They help, they show up, they don't board cruise ships. November 12th, my phone rang. Sloane's name on the screen. I hadn't talked to my sister since the hospital when she told me she wasn't a baby person and hung up on me. I answered anyway, curious what could possibly motivate her to call. Turns out she needed $500. Her credit card got declined at Nordstrom Rack, and she was so embarrassed, and could I just help her out this once and she'd totally pay me back. For a moment I didn't say anything. I just sat there, phone pressed to my ear, thinking about the last 3 years, every time I'd said yes, every time I'd figured it out, every time I'd been the responsible one so that Sloane could be the mess and our mother could play the hero cleaning up after her. I said, no, not with anger, not with a lecture, just no. I can't do that right now. Sloane's voice changed instantly. Disbelief, then irritation. Seriously, it's just $500. You're being ridiculous. No. Silence. Then she hung up. I sat there with my phone in my hand, heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon instead of saying a 2-letter word. My whole life, I'd been trained to say yes. Yes to my mother. Yes to my sister. Yes to anyone who needed me, regardless of whether they'd ever be there when I needed them. That single no felt like breaking a bone and setting it correctly all at once. It hurt, and it was exactly what needed to happen. Now I waited. Darlene would call Ev. Eventually. That $400 was part of her budget. She was counting on it. And when she realized it wasn't coming, she'd want to know why. When she called, I'd be ready. November 19th, 7:47 p.m. Theo was in the bathroom giving Nora her evening bath. I could hear splashing, his voice making silly sounds, Nora's little gurgling laughs. Normal sounds, safe sounds. Our house, our family, our life. My phone rang. I looked at the screen and felt nothing. No fear, no anger, no dread, just a calm, cold clarity, like I'd been preparing for this moment without realizing it. Darlene Pritchard. Mom, I answered. Her voice was warm, too warm, that particular tone she uses when she wants something but doesn't want to admit she wants it. She asked how I was feeling, how the recovery was going. How was that precious baby girl? First time she'd asked about Nora since before the accident. First time she'd called at all since that day in the boarding line when she told me to figure it out. I gave short answers. Fine, better, growing fast. We made small talk for about 3 minutes, the weather in Louisville, Hank's consulting project, her book club's latest pick. I let her ramble, let her fill the silence, let her work up to the real reason she'd called. Finally, she got there. So honey, I noticed the transfer didn't come through this month. I just wanted to make sure everything's okay with your bank. There it was. The reason for the warmth, the sudden interest in my life. $400 hadn't appeared in her account, and she wanted to know why. I kept my voice neutral, steady, like I was reading a report at work instead of confronting my mother about years of lies. There's no problem with my bank, Mom. Won't be any more transfers. We need to talk about something else. Silence on her end. I could almost hear her recalculating, trying to figure out what was happening. I laid out the facts, no accusations, no emotions, just information. Dad's life insurance policy, $80,000 total, $40,000 to each daughter. Both checks cashed in April 2021. Sloane received hers. I never received mine. The funeral costs were $8,500, and I contributed $2,000 of that myself. So where is the remaining $31,500 that belongs to me? The silence stretched. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Then came the defenses one after another like she was flipping through a playbook. First, confusion. I don't know what you're talking about. That money was handled years ago. I have the policy documents, Mom. I have the beneficiary information. I called State Farm and confirmed both checks were issued and cashed. Second, deflection. Your Aunt Colleen has been filling your head with lies. She's always been jealous of me. You know that. This isn't about Aunt Colleen. This is about $31,500 that my father wanted me to have. Third, justification. There were expenses you don't know about. Settling an estate is complicated. Things got absorbed into different accounts. It wasn't intentional. I helped plan the funeral, Mom. I know what it cost. $8,500, not $40,000. Fourth attack. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me. I raised you. I sacrificed for you. And now you're accusing me of stealing. I didn't say the word stealing. You did. Fifth, victimhood. Her voice cracking now, tears threatening. I can't believe my own daughter would do this to me. You've always been difficult, Mariana. You've always oaked for reasons to be unhappy. I let her finish. Let the performance play out. I'd seen this show before. Every holiday, every disagreement, every time anyone challenged her version of reality, the tears, the accusations, the way she'd flipped the script until somehow she was the victim and everyone else was the villain. When she was done, when the sniffling had subsided into wounded silence, I spoke again. I'm not trying to hurt you, Mom. I'm not trying to start a war. I just want what's mine, what Dad wanted me to have. I also told her I knew where my $400 a month had been going. Sloane's credit card payments. 3 years of me unknowingly paying my sister's bills while my mother pretended it was property taxes. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. The silence told me everything. Then she tried one more play. Even if there was some misunderstanding about the insurance money, it's gone now. I don't have $31,000 just sitting around. That's when I used the card I'd been holding. I think you do, Mom. I know about the account Hank doesn't know about. Your emergency fund, your rainy day money. The one you mentioned to Aunt Colleen at Christmas 2 years ago after you'd had too much wine. Dead silence. Not confused silence, terrified silence. I'd found her real secret. The inheritance was one thing. She could spin that, explain it away, claim misunderstanding. But the secret account was different. That was her private safety net, her exit strategy, her proof that she was smarter than her own husband. If Hank found out about that account, he'd start asking questions. Questions about where the money came from, questions about what else she'd been hiding. I didn't threaten her directly. I didn't have to. I said, you have 30 days. If I receive $31,500 by December 19th, this stays between us. If I don't, I'll be contacting a lawyer on December 20th. And at some point, Hank is going to need to know where that money went. I'd rather he heard it from you than from a court document. She tried one last time, her voice small now, defeated but still defiant. You're making a huge mistake, Mariana. You're going to regret this. You're going to destroy this family. I thought about that word family, what it was supposed to mean versus what it actually meant in my life. Maybe, I said, but I regretted the last 3 years more. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up. My hands were shaking, my heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. But I was standing, literally standing in my living room, leaning on my cane, looking out the window at the dark Kentucky evening. Theo came out of the bathroom with Nora wrapped in a towel, her little face pink from the warm water, her hair sticking up in damp tufts. How'd it go? He asked. I looked at my daughter. 7 weeks old when the accident happened. Now almost 4 months old. She'd never remember this. She'd never know how close we came to losing everything because of people who were supposed to love us. Ask me in 30 days, I said. He nodded. He didn't push. That's the thing about Theo. He knows when to talk and when to just be there. He handed me Nora and I held her against my chest. And I thought about the kind of grandmother I wanted her to have. Maybe none at all was better than one like Darlene. If this story has meant something to you, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. It really does make it fair. NCE, and I'm so grateful you've stayed with me this far. Now, let's finish this. The 30 days passed slowly. No calls from Darlene, no texts, no Facebook messages, no emails, no communication of any kind. Complete radio silence from Louisville. I checked my mailbox every day like a kid waiting for a college acceptance letter. Except instead of hope, I felt something closer to grim satisfaction. Either the check would come or it wouldn't. Either way, I'd know exactly who my mother was. December 17th, nothing. December 18th, nothing. I started researching estate lawyers in Louisville, found a few with good reviews, made a list of phone numbers. I'd call on the 20th if I had to. I hoped I wouldn't have to. December 19th, 4:30 p.m., the mail came. One envelope with no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. My mother's careful looping script, the same handwriting that had signed my birthday cards for 31 years. Dear Mariana, happy birthday. Love, Mom. Like love was just something you wrote at the bottom of a card instead of something you actually felt. I opened the envelope standing in my driveway. December wind cutting through my jacket. Inside was a check, $31,500 made out to Mariana Jenkins, signed by Darlene Pritchard. There was also a note card, 3 sentences. This money was always meant for you. There was a misunderstanding with the bank that delayed the transfer. I hope we can move past this. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing, no acknowledgement that she'd stolen my inheritance and spent 3 years lying about it. Just a fiction about a bank error. A hope that I'd pretend nothing had happened. A quiet expectation that we'd go back to normal now. That she'd been forced to pay up. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I just folded the note card carefully, put it back in the envelope, and went inside to deposit the check. Some people might ask why I took the money. If I really believed my mother was a thief and a liar, why accept a check from her like it was a normal transaction? Why not fight for more? Demand a confession? Insist on accountability? Because $31,500 was my father's money. He worked for it. He wanted me to have it. And now I had it. That was the point. Not revenge. Not punishment. Not making my mother suffer. Just getting what was rightfully mine so I could move on with my life. I opened a $529 college savings plan for Nora. Deposited the full amount. My father never met his granddaughter. He died 2 years before she was born. But now his money would pay for her education. Someday when she's older, I'll tell her about her grandfather, Raymond. How he loved his daughters. How he tried to provide for them even after he was gone. How his wishes were honored in the end, even if it took longer than it should have. That felt right. That felt like closure. Except it wasn't quite the end. December 28th, I was folding laundry, Nora napping in her crib. Theo at work. My phone rang. Louisville area code, but not my mother's number. Hank. His voice was different than the last time we'd talked, heavier, tired. He said he needed to ask me something and he needed me to be honest with him. He explained that he'd been doing their end-of-year finances, tax preparation, account reconciliation, all the stuff responsible people do in late December. He was going through their bank statements when he noticed a withdrawal from Air joint account. $31,500. When he asked Darlene about it, she said it was for Sloan. Emergency dental surgery, root canals, crowns, complications, expensive. But what could she do? Her daughter needed help. But Hank looked at the cleared check on the statement. The payee line didn't say Sloan Pritchard. It didn't say any dental office. It said Mariana Jenkins. Did your mother give you $31,500? He asked. And if so, why would she lie to me about it? I stood in my living room, phone pressed to my ear, clean laundry forgotten on the couch. I had a choice to make. I could protect my mother one more time, smooth it over, make an excuse, say it was a misunderstanding, keep the peace like I'd always kept the peace. Or I could tell the truth. Hank, I said, I think you should ask her about my father's life insurance policy. And while you're at it, ask her about the account she has that you don't know about. Long pause. I could hear him breathing, processing, pieces clicking together in his mind. "Thank you, Mariana," he said finally. "I'm sorry to bother you." He hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired and sad and relieved that I'd finally stopped lying to protect someone who'd never protected me. December 29th, through Aunt Colleen, I learned that Hank had moved out, packed a bag, went to a hotel, called a divorce attorney. 12 years of marriage, and it took one bank statement to unravel everything. Darlene was calling everyone in the family, crying about how I'd destroyed her life, how I'd turned her husband against her, how I'd always been jealous, always been difficult, always been the problem child. Sloan left me a voicemail, Callie. And me selfish and vindictive and saying I'd never be welcome in her home again. I didn't respond to any of it. There was nothing left to say. December 31st, New Year's Eve. Theo and I stayed home, ordered Thai food, watched a movie, put Nora to bed by 9. We weren't big party people even before the accident. Now, after everything, a quiet night at home felt like luxury. Felt like peace. At 8:47 p.m., my phone rang. Darlene Pritchard, Mom. I looked at the screen for a long moment. The name that had meant so much to me once. The person I'd spent 31 years trying to please, trying to help, trying to earn love from. The woman who'd told me to figure it out while she boarded a cruise ship. The woman who'd stolen my inheritance and lied about it for 3 years. The woman who even now was probably calling to yell at me or manipulate me or make herself the victim one more time. I looked at Theo. He was watching me, not pushing, just present. I looked at Nora's baby monitor, the little screen showing her sleeping peacefully in her crib. I pressed decline, put the phone face down on the coffee table, went back to my pad thai. The phone didn't ring again. My physical therapist Derek asked me something at my last appointment. He wanted to know if I'd noticed any lasting effects from the accident, any permanent changes. I told him yes. I developed a severe allergy to guilt trips and a sudden intolerance for cruise ship photos on Facebook. He laughed and said that sounded like a full recovery to me. I think he was right. For 31 years I tried to earn my mother's love by being useful, reliable, generous. I sent money I couldn't afford. Drove hours to help with problems that weren't mine. Smiled through holidays where I was treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. I thought if I gave enough, eventually I'd get something back. But love that has to be purchased isn't love. It's a transaction, and some transactions need to be closed permanently. My leg healed, my shoulder healed, my ribs healed, and somewhere in the middle of all that recovery, something else healed too. Something that had been broken a lot longer than 6 weeks. I don't know what happened to my mother's marriage. I don't know if Hank went through with the divorce. I don't know if Sloan ever paid off those credit cards, or if Darlene still posts vacation photos with inspirational captions. I stopped checking. What I know is this: I have a husband who shows up. I have a daughter who will never question whether she's loved. I have $31,500 in a college fund, and $0 going to people who don't deserve it. And I have something my mother never gave me, but my father somehow did, even from beyond the grave. I have proof that I was worth providing for, that I mattered, that someone somewhere wanted to make sure I was taken care of. That's the inheritance that matters, not the money. Although the money is nice, the knowledge that I was worth it, even when my mother made me feel like I wasn't, even when I forgot it myself. Thanks so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate every single one of you. If you want more stories like this one, they're waiting right there on your screen.